So next up, we've got Jennifer Swallow, who's finally managed to make it. So big round of applause for that. The airlines have finally delivered. So yeah, why not? Jennifer was an avid reader for the first 4 decades of her life, but since the internet age destroyed her attention span, she's taken up ultra running at the age of 41 and casual alpinism at age 42. The Andes Mountains are a happy place, but she's run through almost every mountain range in the United States too. That's another round of applause, seriously. And while it might be hard to believe, she prefers the uphill to the downhill. So with winning over coworkers, collaborators, and customers to a new knowledge experience, please welcome Jennifer Swallow.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Swallow, and I am a Senior Technical Content Manager for Splunk. At Splunk, when we introduce ourselves, we like to give what we call our million data points. And that's what makes us who we really are, which is just so much more than our jobs. So if anyone here wants to talk later about slogging across glaciers at 20,000 feet or running 35 miles in the hail just for funsies, I'm your person. But of course, we are here to talk about our jobs. So this is the site that I manage, Splunk Lantern. It's a technical customer success center aimed at increasing product adoption and improving customer retention and renewals. You might understand it best by actually understanding what we're not. So we're not docs. We aren't tied to release schedules, and we don't cover the fundamentals of product functionality. We're not a community. We're not a place where users interact with each other or where just anyone is allowed to post. We don't host blogs, and we don't have marketing-oriented content. And we're not the support KB. We don't host just-in-time documentation tied to specific customer environments or requests, and our success is not tied to any ticket deflection goals, although our content can help with that. What Splunk Lantern is a digital self-service guide for Splunk customers at any stage of their security and observability maturity journeys. We offer technical content written by expert Splunkers who work in the field with our customers every day, helping them implement their use cases, work with Splunk products more efficiently, and get more value out of their Splunk purchase. We offer both ad hoc and prescriptive guidance for Splunk admins, analysts, and business owners. So we are kind of a weird knowledge site to be adding to the mix of all of these others. So how exactly did we get company and customer support for this kind of site? To answer that question, let's start with the job that I was hired to do back in April 2020, that time of our lives we all look back on so fondly. Here's me before my first day outside the Splunk Boulder office, still really excited, thinking by June or July I could go in and hang out with my coworkers. And here is the job that I was hired for. So everything you see here are things that an introverted, simplified, technical, language-loving grammar nerd like myself would love to spend her days doing. Editing, content management, information architecture. Sounded fantastic. The team sounded great too. So I was joining a new department spun up to support Splunk's digital customer experience initiative. We were 7 different teams with a bunch of interrelated projects, and it was this kind of cool startup-y vibe, but in an established company. But of course, not every job turns out to be as described. So let's look now at some of the challenges that I faced at this job that was meant to build a new knowledge base. Even if you're not working on a new project, but something existing, maybe something that's struggling, I'm sure everybody here has experienced at least one of these. So first, back to that job description. So part of my new role would also be to mentor technical editors to ensure career development. Happened at Splunk in 2020, has probably happened in your companies. We went on a hiring freeze right after I was hired, and the 2 technical editor requisitions we had open disappeared and never came back. To this day, we're still just a team of 2. Part of my role would also be to be a critical part of Splunk's expert crowdsourcing program. That crowdsourcing program didn't exist. Part of my new role would be to find participants, but primarily the roles of generating enthusiasm and building relationship and finding authors to work with us, those were the responsibilities of the person who hired me. Unfortunately, he left not long after we launched the site, And he wasn't backfilled, and so all of their responsibilities fell to me until I could hire somebody about 6 months later. Not only did he leave, but I've since been through 5 other managers in my 3 years at Splunk, a complete executive turnover at the company, and lots of departmental restructurings. Yes, thank you, Great Resignation of 2021. So the upshot is that I was trying to build this new knowledge base in an environment where all of the executive support for this project had kind of disappeared. And of all those managers I had, only my current one really has any experience with documentation development or any kind of content development. Now, they all have had skills that I don't, and I'll talk about how I leverage those skills. But if you've ever had a manager that had no experience with documentation, you know that creates some challenges. I also found out shortly after I started that the new crowdsourced knowledge base I was trying to build was not a new idea for Splunk. It had been tried several times before, and each time the project was just dropped. So this added to the complexity of finding people who wanted to work with me because they felt like writing for me would just be a waste of time and effort because my site would probably disappear too. And finally, Splunk is Splunky. Splunk is full of thousands of people working on tiny teams on projects they're really excited about to improve our products and help our customers. Our work culture encourages innovation, and that's great. Except we're not always so good at communicating cross-departmentally and aligning projects and efforts. So again, especially in an all-virtual environment, this has really added to the complexity of building a crowdsourcing program. Okay, so now I've set the stage. Lots of challenges, but of course I'm here because Lantern is successful. We have tens of thousands of monthly users. And so what exactly has this content manager role that I'm in involved that enabled me to bring this site at launch at the end of May 2020 to this site now 3 years later in May 2023? What have I done to get the support of collaborators, coworkers, and of course, our customers? So you might have realized by now I'm not going to talk about writing or editing really because my site is crowdsourced. And so that means the first thing that I had to do when I started at Splunk was let people know that we were out there and looking for help. So when I started, I worked on building up our internal presence first of all, through a Slack channel, through an intranet page, and I leveraged my manager's connections to get time to speak. So I spoke at company all-hands, lower-level departmental all-hands, and lots of tiny team meetings with just 6 or 7 people, but people who were my target contributors. When I can't get time to speak, at Splunk, we have what we call pre-roll slides. And these are informational slides that appear at the beginning of a Zoom meeting while the speakers are waiting for more attendees to arrive. That's great program advertising. And you might have something like that at your company, or maybe you could start it. Now, the bigger the company, the more ways you're going to have to find to reach out. And if you crowdsource externally, which we don't at the moment, there's going to be even more ways to reach out. Regardless of how many channels you have, though, all of these big efforts you take to outreach should be repeated at least annually, right? Remember that new people are joining your company all of the time, and you want to make sure to reach them too. When people do find out about your site, if they're willing to write for you, they're probably going to be doing so on top of their regular jobs. So you've got to think about how you can incentivize them. Now, the best way to do that, of course, is with actual money, but that wasn't an option for us until just this quarter for the first time. So what else would make people want to contribute articles to our site? Because our articles are attributed to the author, writing for us allows authors to build up their professional brand. Come annual review time, they can show their managers ways that they're going above and beyond for their team, sharing knowledge, helping everyone work more efficiently, instead of maybe just hoarding what they know in their inbox. Also, it's kind of cool to be published on an official Splunk documentation site instead of maybe just your own GitHub page. Splunk Lantern content is pushed out to customers through a variety of channels, so inclusion on our site helps convey someone's authority and expertise, and this can also help them work better with their customers. And we also have people that write for us that just aren't strong writers. They really want to share their knowledge, but they just aren't really sure how to get it out on paper, and so they really appreciate having editors and content managers to work with. When you're starting this kind of site, you've got to be very available and very responsive. You really don't want to lose someone's excitement, enthusiasm, or maybe just that teeny tiny window of time they have to work with you that week before they get busy again. So one thing we do is we make sure to publish our timelines very clearly. So time from submission until we get them a draft for review, and overall time to publication. We have a lot of info published on how to work with us, but we don't necessarily assume people have read it. I hear some people don't read the docs. So when somebody sends me a submission and I know maybe I can't get to it to next week, I just make sure to send them an email really quick, thanking them and letting them know what to expect. We also make sure to have very clear out-of-office messages, because the last thing we want to do is make our collaborators think that they're being ignored or that we're not interested in what they have to offer. Being really responsive also means reaching out to any potential leads. So for example, if somebody tells me, hey, so-and-so is asking about Splunk Lantern in a meeting you weren't in, or so-and-so gave Lantern an unexpected shout out in a presentation, I will ask for that person's name and immediately send them a message, even if I don't actually have an action item for them. It could be just to say, hey, thanks for promoting our site. We're really glad that you're finding value in it. But when somebody does have a content idea, I make time for them as soon as possible, and definitely over Zoom, not over email or Slack. Especially in an all-virtual environment, it's really important to make that personal connection, and I find that a Zoom meeting gives us more opportunity to talk, to make sure we understand each other's goals, and to brainstorm different ways that we can collaborate. They might not fully understand what our site is about and what the possibilities are. After that initial meeting, I put a calendar reminder for myself to follow up with that person. Just because Lantern is my priority doesn't make it theirs, and just because they were willing to meet with me for a minute doesn't mean they're seriously thinking about getting that writing done on top of everything else they're working on. So a little bit of a reminder can help push content over the finish line. Now, you won't have to entertain every collaboration idea that comes your way. Some things will be very clearly out of scope for your project. But because Splunk Lantern is a customer success center, we're pretty open to listening to any ideas that come from a customer success team. So for us, that business advice that you get out there about, oh, just say no to any meeting without an agenda, or say no to any meeting that really doesn't seem to involve you, that doesn't work for the type of site that we're building. Especially at the beginning when we were new, we needed to get ourselves out there, make sure people knew who we were, listen to what was happening within the company. I still keep my email filters to a minimum, and I'm constantly finding out what other people are working on that could be really great collaboration opportunities for us. Over time, you may also find, if your project is new, that you're going to have to change your content types, maybe the categories that you have, and maybe even your entire site mission, or a piece of it. On my team, we're not Splunk software experts, and we're not Splunk customer experts. We're technical editors and we're content managers. So we rely on our collaborators who work in the field with our customers every day to tell us what self-service information our customers are lacking. And that hasn't always fit in with what we offered on our site at that time. But if it's what our collaborators say customers need, we really seek to make it fit. So we've changed up our content types and our categories. We actually just added a brand new content type last week, which I'm really excited about. I think it's fantastic. And we've even done some different collaborations that leveraged our site as a concept, not even our content. And so those are some of the examples that you see here on screen. These haven't always worked out. Sometimes they did, but sometimes they just turned out to be really good networking opportunities that were beneficial a year later or a year and a half later. So I said that we published information about our timelines. We also publish information about our processes, and we really make our site as easy to contribute to as possible. We like our authors to be able to write in any format they want because everybody's already using some kind of software out there. And allowing them to do that keeps our platform license costs low, which makes our executives happy, and then it also prevents adding a barrier to contributions. And even though we already have a very lightweight process, just a very simple form built off an Airtable database, we've even customized that process further for certain groups that are using their own internal knowledge sharing software to make it even easier to work with us. And finally, not only there do we publish our timelines and our processes, but we also publish our standards. Sometimes we do have to reject content. And so having our mission and our standards clearly published in multiple locations gives us a place to point potential collaborators to when we have to say no, so that they can learn and see examples and understand how to write appropriate content. The last thing we want is for rejection to feel personal or arbitrary. We want them to keep coming back to us when they have more knowledge to share. All right, so that's Collaborators. Let's move on to Coworkers. So for Splunk Lantern, Coworkers come in two varieties: the folks that use our site with customers in the field every day, and the executives who hold the purse strings. If we want our coworkers to be using our site with their customers, first and foremost, again, has to come promotions. Splunk is a really big company. There's lots of projects going on. The odds that the people we want to be using the site are just going to find it are kind of low. So I already explained a few of the internal promotions that I do, but I've also worked to make sure that information about Splunk Lantern is included in employee onboarding materials across a variety of teams in customer success. I also run an annual site enablement training session, and that provides not only awareness, but also useful how-to information. We want Splunkers to be doing more than just sending a link to the Lantern homepage to their customers. We want them to recommend specific use cases and product tips that are tailored to those customers' needs. So for that reason, we've also developed some other enablement materials like emails, slides, and messaging that Splunkers can copy-paste for use with their customers. And here again, as with Collaborators, for coworkers, the site needs to be easy to use. Now that generally means integrating with other tools in use at your organization. And unfortunately, that's an area where Lantern is still not doing so well. Because of some limitations we have, we're on a third-party platform and we have some data privacy regulations, we're not quite where we want to be yet. So for example, we hear Splunkers say that they would like our use cases populated in customer account software so that they can easily assign use cases, they can track customer usage of our site, and follow up more easily. Executives sort of want that same tracking so that they can see how customers using our site ties in directly to a customer's decision to renew their contract with Splunk. We also want these things to happen, we're just not there yet. And integration doesn't just mean tooling, but it also means navigation experiences and taxonomies. So as much as possible, we try to align the Splunk Lantern UI and navigation experience with those in use in other Splunk knowledge sites and programs. 100% alignment is never going to be possible. There's lots of sites, we each have different purposes, but the more consistent you can be, the easier your content will be to find and use. All right, so that was the coworkers, and now let's go to the higher coworkers, the executives. So I mentioned at the beginning when talking about my challenges that I've had a lot of managers or higher ups that don't understand documentation. And because of that, I've sometimes been asked to deliver to metrics that I couldn't meet or didn't make sense. For example, early on, some leaders were trying to compare our site usage and performance to that of Splunk Docs or the KB or the blogs, and they weren't at all considering the age of our site, the number of pages, the audience, the contributors, any of that. We were also given by the end of year 2 a goal of 90% user satisfaction rating that we had to meet. I asked where that number came from, and I was told, just sounds good, let's do it. So I worked with my vendor to find 7 true peers that we could benchmark against. And with the data that she pulled together, we were able to demonstrate that by the end of year 2, Lantern was actually performing ahead of its peers in a number of key measures, such as sessions per user and page views. She was also able to show that none of those sites had a 90% user satisfaction rating, and that maybe wasn't a fair goal for us to have. I still get requests to deliver metrics that I just can't, and right now a lot of that is for technology reasons. And so when that happens, I make sure to, of course, explain my support for what the executives want, very clearly why I can't do it, and make a very specific request. Hey, this is what I need to make that happen. If you want to get your executives to continue supporting you, also remember your project is not an island. It's your project, but it's really not. It's the company's project. So you're going to need to tie your goals and initiatives into overarching business goals and initiatives. For example, last year, Splunk had an initiative to get more customers moving off just of our core products into our premium products. The Splunk Lantern mission was to support core customers, but we changed that mission and we spent all last year adding content for a lot of our premium products to show customers the value that they could get by expanding their Splunk product portfolio. Splunk had another goal around getting customers to use more of our adoption services, and so we expanded the collaborations we did with those other customer success services. Again, writing articles to show the value, help promote them, and show customers how to access those services. Believe it or not, as low down the totem pole as I am at Splunk, there's actually nobody telling me on a quarter-to-quarter basis what my team has to do. It's up to us to set our initiatives, but to pick ones that don't align to company initiatives just wouldn't make sense. Now, I also mentioned that I've had a lot of managers at Splunk. Some were just my manager for 1 or 2 months. Some were managing 3 or 4 different teams, each with very different missions, and they just didn't have a lot of time to understand Lantern. So to rely on anyone but myself to get my messaging out there to the right people really didn't make sense. So one of my managers helped me set up a monthly steering committee in the communication style preferred by leadership in the customer success organization. She brought the correct audience, and I was in control of the messaging around our needs and accomplishments and goals and challenges. I also write guest posts on other organizations' sites, and I do that so that I'm not relying on management chains or my stakeholders to get the word out, but so that I'm directly am reaching new audiences and new executives with information about our site. However, in a very hierarchical organization, it's not always possible to use your own voice. So I make sure to keep my ears open for information about planning sessions, executive sessions that I know will involve my project. I make sure to ask my manager about them in one-on-ones to understand what will be discussed, how I might be affected, and then I provide her with messaging and slides to help her get our message across. Afterwards, I always follow up and I make sure to correct anything that was misunderstood about what we're trying to do. And it's not just managers you can leverage either. As mentioned, at the beginning of this project, I encountered some resistance and some lack of executive support for a while, and because of that, I often felt pretty shy doing all of this promotion that I'm talking about. I kind of felt like I was bothering people, posting all the time and asking for time to speak. I kind of felt also like maybe this project just really didn't merit all the attention that I was trying to give it. So yes, imposter syndrome, we've all been there. What I found was helpful was getting other people to post on my behalf. When it is just you talking about something all the time, it can be hard to continue to feel like it matters. But when lots of other people around the company are posting about you and how great your site is and how it's helping their customers, that really helps with both your legitimacy and your confidence. Those champions can also connect you to other people who want to help in the same way, even executives and directors. You can also rely on executive assistants to help you understand what other meetings are going on you might not be aware of, or to give you better strategies for communicating with stakeholders and executives. And employee communications folks can make you aware of additional promotional opportunities that you might not be aware of, both internally and externally, which brings me to the last section here, of course, our customers. If you're offering the right content on your site, content that actually helps your customers, gives them what they need, they'll mostly take care of themselves. But as you might have guessed by now, first they have to know that you exist. And so it always starts with promotions. Your customers are most likely getting communications from 24 different places across your organization. So we leverage those. We have information that goes out about new Splunk Lantern articles, exciting announcements, updates to the site. Those go out in different newsletters and emails that customers are already receiving. I also spent a lot of time at the beginning of this project making sure that my site was linked to everywhere else in Splunk sites that different documentation sites and customer success programs are linked to. You can't expect that all of those different site owners know about you, know what your purpose is, and know why you should be included. So you need to be proactive there. My team attends customer events whenever possible, like our annual user conference in the summer, which is one of the rare times that we get to actually meet customers. It's great. And we have social media so that, again, we can engage with more customers. We write our own blogs to promote our content and get the word out there. And we spend time optimizing our site to make sure we have high rankings in Google, which, after all this time spent promoting our site, is still where 80% of our traffic comes from. All right, so after all of that time spent not editing, not writing, not managing content, what sort of results has my new site seen? So these are our metrics from last year. We're obviously very proud of these, especially the nearly 700% growth in returning users. Because we are still unable to tie usage of the site directly to a customer's decision to renew with Splunk, showing how many people come back over and over for our content is really valuable. We also rely on anecdotal evidence. We collect every single comment that we get from customers and from Splunkers. It's important to show how we're really helping people. And as of the end of this past March, we also have a 92.5 satisfaction rating with our content. Thank you. And one more thing, it's not actually just the number of people that are writing for us, although we have a lot more proactive writers coming now. We're not really going out so much anymore, asking people, they come to us. But also, we've had people invest in us. Some of our longest standing collaborators spent some budget on us in 2022 to get a nice custom homepage, improve our navigation, and create a series of fun and Splunky marketing videos for us. We would actually have a lot more collaborators than this if not for some of the technology limitations of our site, which means we just have more work to do. We need to find more collaborators with very targeted expertise, and we need to work more on convincing our executives to invest in the technology that we need. But that's kind of the fun of starting a brand new documentation project. As time goes on, you get to pivot to more exciting and more valuable initiatives. So, what am I hoping that everyone here takes away from this talk? First, collaborators. They have to know you exist, and once they know you exist, they have to know that it's worth their while to work with you. Be responsive and be open, listen to ideas. You don't know where you might be able to take your documentation project, and make sure that you have very clearly communicated all of your standards and processes to make it very easy for people to work with you. If you want coworkers to use your site, make sure they're enabled on how to use it. Don't assume, especially when you're doing a kind of non-traditional site like we are, don't assume that they understand all of the really cool content features that you and all of those collaborators have put together for them. Integrate as much as possible with tools and other frameworks in use so that your site is easy for them to use. To get your executives to support you and hopefully expand your resources and team as time goes on, use clear success metrics and success stories that tie into overarching business goals and priorities. Communicate directly as high up the chain as you can, but empower others to speak to your mission accurately. And finally, for your customers, make sure you're giving them the content that they need, and then shout out loud and proud about everything that you've created to get the word out there. Thank you so much for listening, and good luck out there with your exciting new documentation projects.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. That was quite entertaining. I think I love some of your tips. I'm sure a lot of people that would have resonated with a lot of folks here as well. A lot of good tips.
Thank you.
Around that. So I'll dive straight into the questions. Let's start with something you said. I've heard some people don't read the docs.
Is that
That's a good
I don't think
thing.
I'm wrong.
No. What I mean is, it's one of those, the biggest barriers sometimes, where when you don't have that buy-in
Yeah.
from your superiors or your customers or even your collaborators, how do you often get over that first hurdle, so as to speak?
It is a little frustrating. We do have everything people need to know to work with us very clearly available, but we've just had to accept that you're going to have to repeat yourself many times. And there are new people joining too. They don't necessarily know where to find that information, or, I've been on Slack channels and not looked at the pin posts and somebody says, look at the pin posts. It's just part of the job.
What kind of relationships in the company did you find the easiest or most difficult to establish, and why do you think that was?
So the easiest would be with other customer success programs, because that's how we started, as part of a bigger department with lots of teams trying to collaborate towards a common goal. Yep. So that really helped from the beginning to set that up. And then also with other groups that have been looking for a home for their content. There are very clearly defined sites in most companies, right? There's a support KB and there are docs and there's processes and purposes for those sites. But there are other people out there that say, but what about my content? It doesn't fit in, and this could be helpful. And so we get a lot of enthusiasm that way. As far as the most difficult, there's politics at any company. Yeah. Maybe I won't go into that.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's leave that for another discussion. So when you spoke about your coworkers and how you get them to collaborate and get into that idea, when you have coworkers who love the idea but don't follow through, how do you get them engaged without it seeming like you're nagging?
So yes, we do. We have that issue quite a lot, actually. It's pretty tough, where people get really excited, and the misconception that we have with this crowdsourcing program a lot is people think that we're going to write the content for them. They think they can lob some notes at us and we'll take care of the rest, when what we actually need is a complete draft that we can edit for style and then send it back to them for review. So when people realize they have to submit a complete draft, a lot of people disappear. Yep. So we follow up a couple times. Generally, we'll follow up about 2 or 3 times, and then we just kind of let it go. But if they're working with other people that we know they have a relationship with someone else, we'll maybe ask that person to speak on our behalf, or we'll kind of see if we can get other people to nudge them.
Yeah, so just a little bit more advocacy from your existing folks as well.
Because they're not listening to us anymore at that point.
Yeah. And I think the next question sort of leads into that. Have you gotten to the point where you could get other teams to help advocate for you, and how did that happen?
So it happened at about the 2.5-year mark, where we noticed that other teams across Splunk were proactively advocating for us instead of us having to say, hey, can you help us? It was such a good feeling to realize, wow, okay, there's a lot of buy-in. But it was just asking a lot at the beginning and finding people that, like I said, just following up, hey, somebody was talking about your site. Okay, go, get that person, go after that person. Don't let those opportunities slip by.
Yeah, that's a really great suggestion. Keep people engaged so that they do the grunt work for you, and it's more, your job sort of becomes easy in that way, where you're doing, increasing that customer satisfaction, but you're also getting that buy-in from folks. Yeah,
and of course, we really do appreciate it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. You did mention those scores, and those numbers look like ridiculously high, but they're also good in a way. The 92.5 is a good customer score. How do you often capture that sort of customer satisfaction score? Someone's just got a query about, what mechanisms do you have to capture those scores?
Yeah, so when that goal was given to us, we were actually not given support, a mechanism to get that in. So we spent actually the entire year trying. We had surveys in our site, we had surveys on blogs, we had surveys at our user we tried everything and we got no response. And somehow we landed on just a very simple pop-up Qualtrics survey. And we put that on just the new articles we released in the previous month, because we don't want a ton of pop-ups annoying our users. For some reason, I don't know, customers just really liked that survey. And we had almost 17% engagement on that survey. So we put that up at the end of last November and ran it for about 3.5 months.
Okay, yeah, those are some really good results out of that 1 month, I guess. It just
couple months, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, I think that's probably all the questions we've got, and probably just on time too. But yeah, thank you really for sharing your experiences. It sounded like a tough gig when you started, but looks like you've
But
got
really
over
fun.
that. Everything's fun at the end, I guess. But yeah, thank you, Jennifer, for your talk and sharing those experiences. And yeah, thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
coming.
much.